Women's Connection. I'm Barrie-Louise Switzen, your moderator. The Women's Connection is a program about events shaping women's lives and helping one gain authentic power on a personal or professional level. So won't you stay tuned? Welcome. We're in the 21st century, and if you blink, technology changes our lives forever. But how do we keep up, and what is relevant and what isn't? Where do we focus our attention? And with me today is Dr. Tracey Wilen, and who's going to share some insight into us. And I'd like to welcome. Welcome.
Thank you, Barrie.
You wrote a book, 21st Century Careers. How did that come about, and what do we need to know?
Sure, Barrie. Thank you for asking. So I'm a researcher and a corporate executive, and over the years I've done a number of studies. One of the studies was on women in leadership, and what I found was that women are really accelerating in their careers and in leadership, and I wanted to dive actually a little deeper. So then I started to look at technology and careers, technology and education, and then I realized that we had some major trends coming, such as we're living forever, or at least to 120, of course, to National Geographic, and that meant a much longer employability. Right? So if you're living to 100, 120, you'll be employed for about 50 or 60 years. And so that means we need to start thinking about our careers in a more tangible way.
Well, you're talking about careers, but living to 120, what about your body? How does that stand up?
Well, yeah. So I asked over 200 women, if you're living to 100, what does that mean to you? And they said, Tracey, if I'm living to 100, I have to, one, afford to live to 100, which means I probably have to work until I'm about 80. Which is pretty daunting if you started working at 20, because there's the 60 years, and most of us have been geared up to work 20 or 30 years. But then you also have to think about your health, you have to think about your education, and you have to think about your technology. How relevant will you be 60 years from the day one that you start work?
How do we prepare? I don't know which questions they ask you first, because that's such a daunting topic here.
It is.
I mean, do we prepare our bodies and minds, technology? Basically, do we do a selfie? I mean, you're talking about selfies here.
I am doing a career selfie. Yes, I'm talking about that quite a bit. I would go back to, remember when you were in school and they tell you on a piece of paper, just map out time and subjects. So I say take, between 10 years old and 100 or 120. Put it, on one side, and then put in on the other side health, education, technology, social, all of the things in life that, you need to think about, and start making small goals and say, okay, what am I going to do in my 20s that's going to affect what I'll be doing in my 40s? What will I be doing in my 40s that'll affect what I'll be doing in my 90s? And make small goals so that you can have targets of how you get there.
So how do you know what's relevant today with technology changing as you blink? How do you know in 10 years or 5 years out it's still going to be relevant?
Yeah, actually that's a really good question. So what I encourage people to do is look at their industry, look at their jobs, and look at two technologies that might be shifting the landscape. So for example, if you're in manufacturing, 3D printing and robotics are two technologies that are changing the landscape of manufacturing. The media industry, social media and streaming video, two technologies that are making an impact on people in media. Can you learn these technologies or be aware of these technologies and figure out how will that change in my career? What do I need to know and what can I plan for?
In years past, if you were at a job and you were a loyal employee, like in Japan, you got a job, no matter, even if your productivity went down, you had a job for life. Things have changed so much. How do you maintain that credibility, desire, worth, self-worth for a job?
Yeah, so we've shifted from a classical world. I was born into the classical world. A high school degree or a liberal arts degree was enough for companies were vanilla. They were the same. And now we're in a technology-based world. And so the jobs vary quite a bit. In fact, there's over 30% more jobs today in the market than when I graduated, and there'll probably be another 30% more from today. So technology is, creating a lot of these new paths and avenues. So, to me, it's you have to realize that we're in a shifted world now. People who are graduating will have many more options, but at the same time, many of the options have really been created through technology innovation. Think about the iPhone. It has created so many jobs. I remember when I was at Apple, we used to measure that for every job Apple created, there would be 7 additional jobs created in the world somewhere. And I'm sure that's accelerated now.
That's fantastic.
It is. It is.
It's awesome.
Yes, because you think about it, phones create apps. That's a whole new industry, mobile digital marketing, cases, Uber, right? They're using it in cars and taxis. Just some of these technologies have just opened up new avenues that just didn't exist in the past, in the classical world.
Now, there are more entrepreneurs now because of the new technology.
Well, there's a couple of factors about entrepreneurship. One is I think America is getting on board. Shows like Shark Tank and these reality shows are fantastic because they're inspiring people to say, oh, I can do that. I can see myself starting a restaurant or starting something. Number 2 is technology has really flattened the landscape. It's made it so that I can start a storefront on eBay, or Etsy in a matter of hours and take international currency. So I, in essence, can start an international business in a matter of an hour. And then number 3 is that you can have funding, crowdsourcing, so sites like Kickstarter and Indiegogo. These are places where you can put your idea out, your business out, and people will actually pledge money towards your business. That didn't exist when I got out of college. It was so hard to get funding to start a business. So entrepreneurship to me is just a combination of a lot of factors converging at the same time, and I think it's amazing and really exciting.
Do you believe it's best to be a generalist or a specialist?
So there's a word called T-person, transdisciplinarity. It means the combination of being a generalist and a specialist, and I would throw in the extra T, which is technology. So basically what executives are looking for is not just the generalist anymore, not just the specialist who only knows HR, only marketing. They're looking for a transdisciplinarity type person who can understand how to put the two together and develop a strategy. So, and that's because the work has just become so much more competitive. And so we have to have people who can strategize and understand general and specialized.
It's kind of like, give me back the old days.
Yeah.
You knew where you were going in the old days.
Yeah, that's true. You would work in the same company, you would all actually enter the company at the same age, you'll exit at the same age, you would meet your spouse probably at the company and have your friends and retire together. And today, I don't know, I think it's just much more exciting because the options are there's just so many more.
Oh, I agree. I mean, it's plain vanilla and, it was boring.
Yeah.
Actually boring. Do you find that people are gravitating more towards entrepreneurship than corporate world? And at what age level? Like, is it the millennials or those are the 20s, the 30s, 40s, 50s, and then you've got the retirees.
Yeah, so you see, there's 5 generations. Actually, McDonald's has said there's 5 generations or 4 generations, there's 4 generations working in their workforce. So we have the youngest generation, which are the millennials in the workforce today. Then you have Gen X, and then you have the baby boomers and the silent generation. The younger generation is much more attracted to entrepreneurism, being able to control their days, being able to control their projects, being able to be empowered to make choices. Generation X is sort of, they took their guidance from the baby boomers, but they're much more technically savvy. And they're the ones in the queue waiting to be promoted and saying to the boomers, hey, get out of the way and retire so we can become vice presidents. And the baby boomers, is 53 and up, basically. And so that generation is all about, large firms. But it's interesting is 52% of Americans actually don't work for large firms. They work for either medium, small, private firms. We always read about these large firms because the public, right, they're public firms, Fortune 500, and that's where we can get our metrics from. But the most of America today is actually not working at these large corporations. And the growth are in young firms. I mean, think about it. I remember when Google started. I live in Silicon Valley, and now Google is one of the major employers in the world. I remember working at Apple, right? Started by Steve Jobs and Steve Wozniak. Now it's the major employer in the world. I mean, you think about the young firms actually have the highest growth potential and opportunities. So that's where I encourage young people to actually start looking.
All right, you're in corporate or you're out of college and you find that your skill set is no longer relevant.
Yeah.
How do you go about finding out what is really good for you, good for the future, and how do you do both at the same time, work and create a new
working. It's important to do skill set development while working, because number one, there's a lot of resources at work that you can use. A lot of corporations offer training or free classes or will fund you to take classes, and I think like while you're working then you can integrate it. Number two is also while you're working you have customers and vendors. I've done so much for vendors, teaching me a lot of the newer technologies to help me develop. And number three is through with your children in PTA clubs or volunteer, you can take roles. A lot of women actually volunteer on boards or for non-for-profit so they can build their P&L skills or operational skills if they're not getting it at work. So I think there's a number of ways that people can develop their skills while working. And if you're not working, then it might be worth going back to school part-time, volunteering and in your field and trying to develop new skills while you volunteer, or just working with someone to say, I want to shadow you. I had people who tell me that they shadowed people in positions so that they could start to develop skills and understand what they needed to do. There's a lot of strategies that someone can.
With the age force expanding and trying to take later retirement, is there one area people should concentrate on?
There's a couple, actually. One is healthcare. I have a colleague of mine. She's actually today 69. She is working, but she's also taking gerontology certification on the side while working, and her work will pay for this because they find it valuable to expand her skills. And I said to her, why are you doing that? And she said, well, look, when you get to be my age, and she said, I will be living probably to 100, and I'll have to work until I'm 90. So you have to think about what industries are age appropriate, that are local. And she said, there's only two near me. One is technology and one is healthcare. And she said, I'm not going to be relevant to technology because you need to be young. But she said, let's face it, who's better to take care of a geezer but a geezer? So she said, I'm going to shift into gerontology and healthcare. So I think that's something to think about is, what's age appropriate and where are the growing sectors, and healthcare is one. Technology is another, but again, it may not be age appropriate. The other that I encourage people to do is look at your skills. And do you have a skill that you can hang a shingle, like, cooking, web design, writing, editing, accounting, or do you have an expertise? Like where you're working in corporate America, could you be a corporate consultant on HR or marketing or some area? And then figure out which one of these skills, expertise can you pursue as an encore career. The career that starts when you exit your last one, your more formalized career.
Well, that's good because so many companies are merging, and it's like, well, this culture doesn't match that culture, and you're right in the middle, and it's like, which way do you go and make sure you still have a job at the end of the day?
Yes, and that's a good point because I say, culture can actually really kill you. I remember when I left one firm, blindly thinking that I was joining another firm with a similar culture. And when I got there, I only had 3 interviews, and that was not enough to really assess. So I took the job and realized, this is not a fit. So I had to bide my time, create success, and then aggressively look for a company that I knew that I would be a better fit for. And I do that through social media, looking at firms, talking to people who work there. When I interview, asking for multiple interviews, at least 8 or 10 with different people in the company, and reading up and seeing what employees say about working for a firm. So I think fitting in a culture is pretty important, and it's worth aggressively weeding out companies as much as they weed you out, because you want to have a good fit and you want to stay somewhere.
Now, you're very much into social media.
I'm into technology. You know, where would women be today without technology? From dishwashers to washing machines to mobile devices to social media, where would we be? So I think that, you know, technology is an enabler for, particularly for women. So I love technology.
Okay, you have written numerous books on women.
Yes.
I'm glad. But what would be the common denominator through all the books?
Oh, women's success. I was very interested in promoting and accelerating women's success, starting with myself, right? Back in when I was in my early 20s, I was commuting internationally on business to very role-dominated types of countries, Asia, Europe, South America, and I was having a hard time trying to figure out how I could be credible as a young single woman. And so then I started to research and interview women who were creating success, documented it, and the first book, Doing Business with Japanese Men, actually became a New York Times bestseller on the business list, and LA Times bestseller. And then I got flooded with letters from women who said, do more, right? Because this is pre-internet. So there wasn't a lot available. So I kept interviewing and doing research studies and more women, and covered Asia, different countries there, Taiwan, Singapore, South America, Mexico, different countries in Europe. And then eventually I stopped because eventually most of the information was available on the internet. More recently, I did a book on American women in leadership. 2013 is called Women Lead, and how gender and generations are driving new forms of leadership. Because I think, you know, this 2014 is the year of the woman. 2012 was the year of the Olympics and women. There's so many opportunities for women that are just incredible.
With all these opportunities, there's still two laggings here. One, we're only paid 73% or 73 cents on the dollar for the same job. And yet, with all the boardrooms, we still don't have a big presence there.
Yeah, so some of those numbers, again, are around public companies. I just want to remind people that 52% of Americans actually don't work for these very large firms. And yes, there's inequity there, which is why I do encourage women to look at all the options. If you look at like medical, right, we have parity there, or almost parity there in pay scales. If you look at certain industries where women are predominant, such as healthcare or retail or fashion, we see different dynamics. If you look at medium-sized firms, we see many more women in senior leadership positions, and differences in salary are not as extreme. So that's why I really encourage women to look at all the options, employment options, as well as self-employment or franchise or other avenues where you can make money and accelerate. Because let's face it, for every 100 degrees, college degrees that men earn, 149 women earn degrees. And the jobs of the future are for people who are highly educated. And so women are really on the track here and are accelerating and succeeding.
Are women different as an entrepreneur than a man?
So I measured that actually in the Gender and Generations Women Lead, Driving New Forms of Leadership, because what we found is that entrepreneurs in general, men and women, took more risks than corporate men and women, right? So that's number one. Entrepreneurs are set apart from the corporate America. It makes a lot of sense because you have to wear a lot of hats, right? You're running your own business. It's much more risky. Number two is we found that millennial women were much more confident than Generation X women, baby boomer women, and Generation millennial men. So our millennial women are actually very confident. So whether they choose to be entrepreneurial in a corporation or entrepreneurial by starting their own business, they in general are more inclined to take more risks than generations before. And the millennial age that like a millennial today would be 33 and under. So, so those are some striking differences that we found between entrepreneurs and then also gender and generation that I thought was very useful. The other one is that CXOs, so you know, chief operating officers, chief executive officers, executive vice presidents, women said that what set them apart from men and women, regardless of age, was the ability to take a risk, a calculated risk, but by taking a risk, because that's where they had their most advancements, whether it's by an overseas assignment or taking on a different division or taking on a high-risk project, a high-visibility, high-risk project, that they were much more successful in taking risks.
What do you credit this self-confidence in these young women of today?
Well, actually, I saw a pattern in all of the interviews, so I went back and counted the word mom. And in over 200 interviews of women, the word mom came up 702 times. Now, that's striking to me because whenever I interview women for research studies, I always had asked them in the past, what influence has your mother had on your career? And they would always say none. It was a dad or a brother or someone at work, a male at work. Today, 702 times in 200 interviews, the word mom came up 3 to 4 times per interview. And women were saying, I learn from my mother. I either learned things I didn't want to do, or I learned things that I wanted to do, or my mother gave me renewed confidence that I didn't have before. But my mother, more than ever, was behind me and a role model. And I think that's a big shift. And that's where a lot of these women today have gotten their confidence from. And it's not just mothers. Grandmothers came up, sisters, aunts, and women at work. And I thought that was a big shift from just 10 years ago, where women were not talking about their mothers as role models.
That's very interesting, because if you figure, you said that they were the 30-year-olds, the 20 and 30-year-olds. So you add 30 plus 20 at least, that's the 50-year-old. Going back 50 years, you had the ERA, the Equal Rights Amendment, where women were, Gloria Steinem was pushing, and Bella Abzug, they were pushing. So this was like, this is a big shift.
It's a big shift, because also what women are saying is, you know what, you don't want my life. I want you to have a better life than I did. You know, whether it was I was the mom who tried to do it all, or I was the mom who stayed home, right? Or I was the mom who had to bake cookies. What women are saying is, my mom is giving me much more information and much more excitement about my own possibilities. And I think that even if it's don't do what I did, they're very excited about it. And I think that's wonderful, because, you know, having women influencing other women is phenomenal.
It's awesome the way the tide has changed. What do you mean by the she economy?
The she economy, you know, we were just talking about social media, and I actually think women are dominating here, because women love technologies that make absolute sense. A mobile device makes a lot of sense, so women are very high users of mobile devices, whether it's for work, whether it's for connecting with friends or with their family. Women also make a lot of sense out of social media, and women are starting a lot of these businesses of social media, whether it's because they have communication skills or because they enjoy the technology, but they're becoming our digital marketers. And many of these women are starting these firms, and they're getting bought by large firms like Google or IBM or Cisco's. So it's pretty exciting to see that women are using technology and creating really a she economy. The other is, let's look at Mary Barra. No wonder that she is the CEO of General Motors. Who do you think's major decision making on car purchases? It's women. Women, you know, control the purse strings. And so this is what I think will help accelerate many more women into power, you know, positions of power, because they're realizing women are our consumers. So we need to have women marketing to women.
We're always talking about technology, and it changes, like I said, in the blink of an eye. The next up is 3.0.
Yes.
Tell us about that.
Yes, so I wrote this book called Society 3.0, How Technology is Changing the Nature of Society, Work, Education, and Careers. So it sort of summarizes a lot that we've been talking about today, which is due to the rapid acceleration of technology, society has changed. And one area that I looked very closely at was how women had more opportunities, and technology is a part of that. Number two is I looked at education, right? Education has really shifted from, you can take education online now, that didn't exist, right, years ago. But number three is it's changed the nature of work. It's changed, you know, work can be distributed. Work is not necessarily in an office. Now we can have entrepreneurial efforts. So we have so many more choices. And I really attribute a lot of that to technology. And then finally, it's changing our careers. That because of technology, we see the nature of work changing, careers will shift, careers will include technology and require a lot more planning. So that's what I talk about, is some of the forces that have changed the nature of society, work, and education, and then also what are some of the key technologies that have changed all of these areas. And you know, the thesis of it all is keep your eye on technology. It's got to become a part of your life because it does impact us in so many ways.
Yeah, it's kind of like now they're saying doctor visits you can do online.
Technology, everything from wearable technology, where you can take all your vital signs through different devices that you wear, and then send it into the physician, to telepresence, video conferencing, all of the remote, as you said, for rural, to the ability to make body parts, exoskeleton, right? Being able to slip on basically a skeleton suit, and as a paraplegic, having the ability to walk. If you can imagine, you know, robotics enabling you to walk, to taking a 3D printer and being able to print an ear and being able to replace someone's ear who's lost it for whatever reason with natural cartilage. So we're using augmented virtual reality to be able to do eye surgery. An eye surgeon said to me, augmented virtual reality is the difference between being exact and precise. And when you're dealing with the human eye, you want to be precise. So technology just opens up so many opportunities for us as humans to really be healthier and to live longer and actually take control of our health.
In the closing moments of the show, Tracey, what would you like to leave the audience with?
Well, I always say, you know, it's girl power. You know, at the end of the day, I started my research always researching on women. And it's not only girl power today, it's also mom power. And I have a very strong belief in women's success. I think that every year women just keep breaking the rules, breaking the barriers, and I am so positive about the success of women. So that's my message for people here.
Tracey, thank you so much for joining me. It's been great.
Thank you.
Now I have to think about what technology I need for going forward. And what technology are you planning on learning to propel you forward? Love to hear from you. Please write us here at The Woman's Connection. Bye now.